This is a quick guide to editing an image for high key effects. I'm working in Lightroom, I'm in the develop mode, and this is an image I took at Haysborough roughly about a year ago. So I'm going to start off by turning the thing black and white. So on the basic panel, I'm going to click black and white at the top right corner. I'm going to try all the different controls to see what helps this image look high key. Basically, I'm after making this histogram move along to the right hand side and have less of a full tonal range than a normal image does. So I'm going to move the exposure slider to the right and see how that makes the whole thing brighten up. I have to keep watching for my highlight clipping, so the red on the tide there makes you aware that the highlights are now starting to go off the end of the scale. So I'm going to ease that back a little bit just until the red disappears. I'm also going to play with the highlights. So again, if I go to the right, that starts clipping the highlights. I'm going to push the shadows up so that everything gets paler and paler, and you can go right up to plus 100 on the shadows, and that doesn't clip the highlights, so I'm going to leave that somewhere around 80. I want to retain some detail in the sea and obviously in the posts. I'd like it to go very, very light and very pale toned all over. So I'm going to play with the whites, and then the whites quickly make the highlights clip. And also the blacks, I'm going to turn the blacks up. You do want some contrast in the sticks, but not very much. Okay, I'm going to move down now and play with the black and white mix. So I'm going to try the different colours to see what effects they have on the image. So red doesn't have very much effect on this. Obviously, not a lot of red in the picture. Orange does affect the wooden posts. So the more I turn that into the minus section, you can get a bit more contrast in the posts. I'm going to leave it on about plus 30. Yellow has a similar effect. I quite like the yellow because that just brings a little bit more contrast back in the water, so you can see the reflections of the posts in the water when I bring that down, which I think adds to the image. Although it's adding darker tones, I can move those around a bit afterwards. Green affects the top of the water line, so I'm going to turn that up a bit to make that pale, I think. Aqua hasn't got much effect on this. Blue affects the skyline, so I'm going to turn that up a bit and make that pale. Purple doesn't have a great deal of effect, and I don't think magenta does either. Okay, so I'm now just going to tweak the exposure a little bit more again. Again, we're soon into clipping, so that's about as far as I can take that. Okay, so those are the global adjustments I think made. What I want to do now is go and select the subject matter. So if I go into the masking panel, which is the little circle here, there's an option to select the subject, which is an automatic feature. So I'm just going to click select subject and see what happens. So it's detecting the subject now. And it's done that quite well. So it's selected all the posts, and now I can alter those separately from the background. So if I tweak the exposure on the posts, I can turn it up or down. But I think actually what I'd like to do is probably invert that selection and play around with the background. So there's a little box at the top here which says invert, so that inverts your selection, and now it allows me to play around and alter the brightness of the background. So the shadows again are making the whole background thing a bit lighter. Obviously the whites do a great deal of that, so you don't want the whites clipping out so much. And the blacks, again, if you turn that up, they make the whole thing a little bit paler. Okay, now I'm going to go off the masking and just go back to the basic panel, and I'm just going to play around with the texture a little bit and see how that affects that affects it a bit. I'm going to try clarity. Clarity is quite nice because it does add a little bit of negative sort of haze onto it, and dehaze also does actually dehaze is much more effective than the other two. So dehaze works quite well. So I'm going to add a little bit of dehaze on the negative side. And I'm just going to go back to contrast a little bit, just to see if that adds anything else into the shadows. There's one little thing down here which is a little post that's just right on the corner of the image, which is annoying me, so I'm going to just get the spotting tool and just clear that out of the way. So it's in the wrong place at the moment. I'm just going to bring that down there and click off that, and it gets rid of that little detail that's distracting for the eye. So I think that is more or less right. I'm just going to go back once more and click on the mask again. I'll turn off the inversion and just play around with the sticks a little bit and see what the contrast slider does, just to add a little bit more texture into the sticks. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it there. As you can see, the histogram is very much over on the right hand side. There's a little bit of detail in the mid-tones because of the posts and some of the water, but generally there's very little shadow detail at all. So I just turned it black and white. I used all the sliders on the basic control panel and to see what they did, so mostly exposure, contrast, highlights. I used the black and white colour conversion down here to adjust the various separate colours of the image, and then I went to the selection tool, selected the subject, which in this case is the posts, and did a bit of work separately on those. Then I inverted the selection so that I could work separately on the background as well. My key goal really was to make the histogram go right over here to the right hand highlight side of the graph and have very pale, very highlighted tones, which is what is generally known as high key